Hello, 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 everyone. I am so excited about this conversation today. My name is Nia Martin Robinson. I'm one of the founding partners of For the Culture, and this is the very first episode of our Beyond series. For us, we really wanted to create this Beyond series so that we were having an opportunity to go a bit deeper than just the surface around key observances, calendar moments, and holidays, really wanting to know how we can be deeply engaging folks past just the month that they've been allotted. So our very first series that we're doing today is with Michele Rayner Goolsby, and she is one of my personal sheroes. And this episode is called Beyond Pride. And so we're thinking about how do we think not just, the calendar month of June for how we are showing up for and supporting LGBTQIA folks, but how are we doing that all year long? And how are we thinking about what that looks like in the workplace? Michele, and it's not just Michele, Representative Michele Rayner Goolsby. She is an attorney and one of the fiercest fighters for civil rights for Black folks that we've seen really in our time. And she's a member of the Florida House, proudly representing District 70. And right, Michele, the first Black queer woman to be in the state house in Florida. So that's absolutely exceptional. Michele's known for her work around state-sanctioned police violence. She's award-winning and highly sought after in terms of her work with civil rights, and has worked, with folks like the illustrious Ben Crump. And it's really been, as far when we're looking at what it looks like to be thinking about how we are engaging around the law as it relates to the work around Black Lives Matter. Michele really has been at the forefront of that work. So thank you so much, Michele, for everything that you do and for being here with us today. We're super excited about it. And we'll talk more and give you some more space to talk more about who you are, your story, and how you got to where you are. But first, girl, let's get into Pride. Like, how was your June?
Well, first, Nia, I'm so excited to be with you. You are one of my personal heroes. So, like this, I love Black women. Y'all are my safe place. So, I am super excited to be here for the inaugural episode. Yes. So, how was my Pride? Well, I live in Florida, and Ronald Dion DeSantis is our governor. So,
just say it's fine.
I think we could just wrap up that question, right? No, right? So it's always a act of resistance to navigate the month of Pride here in Florida, because a lot of times we have just came out of legislative session. There have been harmful bills to our community, and he decides that he wants to sign those bills at the beginning of Pride, right? So it's also that double-edged sword. And then also, June 12th marks the horrific massacre at Pulse nightclub, right? So we start Pride celebrating, but then also remembering, the 49 souls that we lost. And we have a governor that it seems that every Pride month, he is trying to show us, it really doesn't matter. Y'all think y'all do, I'm gonna try to take your joy. Don't do that. So it's always, I think, a bit of a dichotomy for me when it comes to June. And especially, I think, this Pride Month on the heels of the Dobbs decision and the reference to, marriage equality and contraceptive and gay sex. I mean, I don't know why people are so, maybe because our sex is better. I don't know, but
that sounds like another Beyond.
We got that. That's a whole other series, but I don't know why they're so concerned. But yeah, I mean, so it's always living here and occupying that space. It's always I want to have joy, but then I'm also y'all, when it comes July 1st, we gonna have to, really.
But I think what this this June, sort of sitting at both, looking at this massive onslaught of mass shootings, like you said, the Dobbs decision, and as a person who found my political home in the reproductive justice movement, and I still serve on the board of the New Orleans Abortion Fund and Spark Reproductive Justice Now, June was devastating. And so I was sort of battling this, excitement around what it means to be a proud Black queer woman was just being completely enraged.
Mm-hmm.
Just completely enraged. But yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation today because I'm looking to you to shine a light on all of this and to make it make sense.
Trying.
If you
Trying.
can. If you can. So, before we dig in a little bit more and keep dissecting what Pride Month looked like, I'd love to start to learn more about your story, Michele. Most people know that you're the first Black queer woman elected in the state of Florida, but tell us how you got here. How did this become your passion? And what has it been like for you, both personally and professionally, navigating your life as a Black queer woman in a place like Pinellas County, Florida?
Right. I mean, so who would have thought, right? Going to law school, all of those things, I never really thought about being elected, but I think that sometimes you kind of meet the moment, right? And so I, went to law school. Before even law school, I was doing campaign politics. So I worked on, various presidentials and US Senate races and local races. And I ended up going to law school. I swore I was going to be a transactional lawyer. I just wanted to make all the money so I could help folks, but I just didn't want to actually I was like, no, I'm good. And I interned at the public defender's office in this small town called Palatka, Florida, where 90% of the defendants were Black. And even though that the town had more Black folks, it was white ran. And I saw the inequity there. And I realized I kind of had a knack for trial law. And I also saw the intersection of civil rights law. So, and I also come from parents who were in the civil rights movement, right? So my mom and my dad, they were the first Black students, some of the first Black students to integrate the University of South Florida. So I grew up watching Eyes on the Prize. So all my friends were watching Care Bears and stuff. My mom was like, you're gonna sit down here and you're gonna watch Eyes on the Prize because you need to know what's going on. So I think I got it honestly. I just was kind of trying to fight kind of my life's work and my passion. And so I ended up becoming a lawyer. I started in the public defender's office and then ultimately went into private practice doing criminal defense and civil rights work. And there was a case in 2018 that really, I think, really actually taking it back to 2016, where I met one of our mutual friends, Chelsea Fuller. There was 3 young Black girls who were killed by law enforcement. They were ran off the road into a pond. And because of how the law is set here, if you are suspected to be in the midst of committing a criminal offense, that there is no recourse for their family, right? And these were 15 and 16-year-old Black girls, and not one officer took any means to try to save them and watch them drown. And it was then I was like, okay, I can, do this criminal defense and okay, but there's something more. And that's when I really started intersecting my legal advocacy with policy change, right? And not just I'm going to do it case by case, but how do I become really a movement lawyer? How do I intersect that? And how do I make that change, not just on a case by case basis, but in the streets, in the community, and ultimately where I'm at now in the state legislature. And then in 2018, I handled a case with Ben Crump of a young Black man that was shot and killed in Clearwater, right here in Pinellas. And his killer wasn't arrested for 25 days because of the stand your ground law, which is the next, it was literally very similar to the Trayvon Martin case. And we worked with the family. This killer ended up getting arrested, ended up, being found guilty at trial. But the thing that stuck out to me is that all these things happen, right? We were able to get an outcome that didn't happen in the Trayvon Martin case. But let's go back. Why was this even allowed to happen to begin with? Because there's no the justice is hollow, right? The justice is hollow for a family that's lost their son. The justice is hollow for children who will never grow up with their father. The justice is hollow for the little boy who watched his father die on a dirty convenience store floor. And so realizing again, it's that law and the policy. And so when this seat became open, I ran for it. Actually, Ben Crump was like, you're going to run for this seat. I was like, absolutely not. I have a whole wife. And this is a Black district, right? And so being from the South, sometimes our people, us, they're,
Sometimes it be your own people. Sometimes.
and sometimes it be your own people. And I'm like, I don't know how they are going to accept this.
Right.
And when I ran, we entered into the pandemic, and Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery were murdered by state violence. And it was meeting that moment. And I met the moment. And I think that people were less concerned about who my wife was or who I laid down with. And they were more concerned about, we know that she's always fought for us. So I was able to get elected. And now I'm running for reelection to the state house. But I think it's about meeting that moment, and to me, being in a legislature, and we'll probably talk about this more, that is so partisan, that is really ran by Ronald Dion DeSantis. I don't call him the governor. I'm very disrespectful because he's very disrespectful to us.
We could just call him like RDS or something. We don't even have to say his whole name.
RDS, yeah, RRD, whatever he is. But and so, and we'll talk more about that, but that kind of is how I got to this point right now, being in the state house.
Okay. So let's talk pride and capitalism, pride and consumer. And I'm thinking about that because you were like, once upon a time I wanted to be a transactional lawyer. I was going to get out, I was going to make this money. We know that a lot of times, and I feel like what we've seen a lot, especially since I think 2020 brought on a lot of that, is this commodification of everything from our fallen heroes to holidays and celebrations that we've held incredibly sacred, like Juneteenth, right? And so it seems that every single year, Pride gets a little bit more branded, a little bit more corporate, a little bit more commodified. I would be lying if I didn't say that I bought 3 of the Pride sweatshirts that Target did this year, because one thing that's happening is that like they're working with with Black creatives and Black designers to build out really interesting lines and interesting merch and apparel. But then how is this, in your opinion, how is this commodification of Pride impacting the work and the liberatory struggle that our folks are fighting for?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, have you been in the conversations I've been having with my colleagues and other folks in our community? It's one thing that, we have this representation that we see, and that, our being is a being that is, quote unquote normal, right? You know what I mean? And that it's, being celebrated. The other part is that when we have bills here in the state of Florida, like the Don't Say Gay bill, or like the trans youth sports ban bill, and other harmful legislation, I find that these same corporate partners are quiet, right? I find that they will only speak up until they are pushed or till they are threatened. And so it's great that I can walk into Target and, get these cute outfits, because I bought shirts, I bought, things as well. I bought the wares, and that's great, right? And also support folks in our community who they're working with, right? But I also think that it has to be not just in word, but it has to be in deed as well, because the word is like, okay, like we got y'all, like we have this, because guess what, Pride, like they're making money off of it, right? They're making money off of it. But when it comes to this harmful legislation, for example, when we think about the Don't Say Gay bill, one of the questions I had to a lobbyist at Disney, I said, why are y'all still donating to the Republicans that have pushed this bill? Y'all donated $70,000 to the House sponsor of this bill. So you can't tell me that you stand with me, but then yet you're funding him to get reelected. I understand that, Republicans in the state of Florida are in power, but make that make sense. Like y'all can't have it both ways.
And they can't make it make sense. The math isn't really mathing.
The math ain't mathing. The math ain't mathing.
So when we're talking about just, June 1st to June 30th, right? It's this collection of time that is Pride Month. And we've talked some about what that commodification looks like and how people are literally like making money off the backs of our identities. How do we hold these companies accountable either through how thinking about how they're supporting some of the legislation, either directly or indirectly, that you're talking about. But how do we hold, how do we hold these companies accountable for the other 11 months of the year?
Yeah, I mean, these are questions and conversations that I've had with folks in organization and LGBTQ led organizations throughout the country. One of the things is that I know that I have no problem going on social media, Twitter or other things, and sitting down with them and saying, "This is great. I'm so glad that you're doing this. But what is allyship, and what is not even allyship? Let's move from that to accomplishment look like?" And so I think that there is a lot of money in our community, in the LGBTQ community, right? There's a lot of money in that community. And so for us, I think that, as we are, on the heels of these things happening politically, where we are seeing, there were 157 Republicans that voted against marriage equality a day ago. How are we going to say, listen, somewhat similar to the civil rights movement, what Black folks said, listen, like, we're not going to allow y'all to be silent. And if you are going to be silent and complicit, it will cost you. And ultimately, what folks who in capitalism understand is money. They don't understand. This is great. They understand money. And so that is their pain point. And so I think that we have to really get concerted about that. But also, I mean, we can have this conversation. I also think that we also have to deal with in our own community the schism of the white supremacy that we have in the LGBTQ community, when we have folks that's like, well, listen, I have money, as long as I can stay married and I have some wealth, I'm okay. No. That's not how any of this works. Because if we all aren't free, especially Black trans women, then none of us are free.
That's right.
And so I think that we also in our community have to really not even start having those conversations, because we're having them, but really start acting on those things and really changing and shifting the way that we move within our own community.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of that shift too is like shifting the way that we actually think about inclusivity and what it means, right? It's not just, pictures or checking a box. And so, what are some of the most significant things that you think companies and organizations can do to better serve and support the LGBTQIA plus employees and community members? And how do they do that in ways that aren't tokenistic or extractive, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously we know a lot of organizations and companies, they have affinity groups, right? I've been a speaker at many affinity groups, but I think that when you have, that's not tokenistic, for example, everyone's like, okay, we have a Black, or LGBTQ DEI, professional. That's great. But do you have someone that's Black or LGBTQ that is the COO, or that is, the ED? And so instead of just, because in some ways, while I think it's important to have, a diverse person that is, holding, the diversity and inclusion spot in a company, do you have us elsewhere that's just not that box, right? Because we can do more than that. We can do more than just diversity. We can, be a CFO. We can be an ED. We can be one of the decision makers. And I think that some of, I'm thinking a few years ago, there's a very prominent makeup store that I won't name, but we all know. I go there and they sell Fenty, so who it is. And that was the criticism they had. The criticism was like the only Black person they had was just doing diversity, and they didn't really have anyone else. And so to me, that's where it feels like that's just tokenistic. You can only talk to the colored people stuff. You can only talk to the gay stuff. We don't really want you to do anything else. And I think that you put folks in position of power that aren't just in a token spot, but you also then empower them to do their job in a way that's not paternalistic or micromanaging, and allowing them to have that autonomy. And then also realizing your own stuff, your own prejudice, your own bias, while we're operating in those spaces.
And I think for me, it's thinking about what you're saying about like not just holding a chief DEI position, but for us at For the Culture, one of the things that we see and really try to encourage folks that it's incredibly exciting when, when organizations are like, we're ready, like we've got the resources, we're going to hire, a vice president of equity, we're going to hire a chief culture officer, and then like, but then there's not a lot of additional thought around, does that person have a team? Right. How are they going to get all of this work done? What does their budget look like? Right.
What does the position look like? What does the vision look like?
Right. Who do they report to? What does the power look like? And so also making sure that we are putting folks, especially, and I'm going to just say it, like especially Black women in these positions around, what it means to hold the whole of DEI inside of the organization, make sure they have the tool and the team to be able to back that up.
100%.
So we're talking some now about DEI, and I know that there has been, you have been fighting the good fight, doing the Lord's work in Florida. What is the reality right now of what DEI work can actually look like in the state? And that's DEI work, and that's not just when we're talking about DEI, folks. We're not just for the culture, anti-racism is a strong value for us, but we also know that we're looking at a state like Florida, we're thinking about intersectionality. So we're thinking about race, we're thinking about gender, we're thinking about sexual identity. What does, I see you ready, you're like jumping out of your skin, like I want to answer this question right now. What's the reality of DEI work? Like could a firm like For the Culture actually come and operate and have a client in the state of Florida right now?
Ooh, yikes. So the short answer is I don't know, because we have the Stop Woke Act that has been signed into law. And it's not just about teaching in schools, but it's about business, right? It's about organizations, it's about companies. And basically the law really handcuffs organizations and companies when it comes to DEI and training, right? And basically it's this subjective, if you feel uncomfortable, right? So if you feel uncomfortable, then you could sue this company, and then the company has to go through litigation. So what I've seen, even on a higher education level, I have friends that teach at different, universities, and they're even being told, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that. I've seen folks who are revamping some of their DEI policies, and I've seen other folks who said, fuck it, like, I'm not gonna do it. Like, you can sue us and keep it moving, right? So yes, For the Culture can come. I think that whatever, company, organization that would invite you to be a part of their, their process, they have to be aware of what's happening. I think also really, just from a legal standpoint, I think that this bill, this legislation, this statute is really ambiguous. And I think you're going to start to see some challenges to it, not on the side of folks who are, uncomfortable, but for folks who are saying, like, this is very just ambiguous. This doesn't make any sense. It's overbroad. It's very subjective. I don't think that it's based anywhere in, to me, law. I think it flies in the face of federal law as well, right? So I think that, one, I would say to specifically companies in Florida, while we're kind of in this like spot where we don't know what's going on, do not be afraid to continue with what you were going to do, right? Do not be afraid to do that. Obviously, consult an attorney, consult, an employment lawyer. But I would say continue to do that, because I think that we're going to start seeing challenges. We've seen it on just the school side, but I think we're going to start seeing legal challenges on the business side as well. I think we're going to see that come about. But I would say to folks who have businesses here, who believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, to continue that work. I think that this was more for the governor of the state of Florida, because he wants to become president. This is what all of this is about. This is him being able to message to his base. This is him being able to message to that Trump ilk. And so for me, I would tell you to keep doing what you're doing until we get clear guidance on if we can or cannot.
And, I think a lot about what's the role of, for me for us and my team as DEI practitioners, what is our role in preparing our clients, for some of this work. So, because it's not just Florida, right? We know that it's not just Florida, whether we're looking at, attacks on voting rights, attacks on the rights of trans youth, attacks on bodily autonomy and abortion access. It's not just Florida. And it's not just the South, right? Because I feel like people will, like to sort of dive in on the South and act like it's the only place where, the violation of human rights is happening. But we know that state bills are being proposed across the country that are related to race, to gender affirming healthcare. You spoke a little bit to it, but can you say a little bit more about, what you think the role is of DEI practitioners in preparing our clients to be thinking about how these different pieces of legislation are impacting the workplace?
I mean, we've already seen it now, and this is outside of the legislative process, where we have ACA, which is our, agency on healthcare. They are, have started to where Medicaid and Medicare can't cover, gender affirming care, right? So here's some of the things that I would say. If you are a business owner, a company, I would do the thing regardless of what your state says. So I would find, when you're thinking about insurance, I would find an insurance carrier that would offer gender affirming care. I would find an insurance carrier that would allow for, fertility treatment or abortion care, right? I think that we can't just say, this is what the government's doing. Oh, I don't know what we can do. We have to be bold in saying, I understand what the government's going to do. I understand what their plan is, but this is what we're going to do if we're really committed to those things. And we're not just going to have, a chief equity officer, but we're going to show that in how we offer our benefits. We're going to show that in how we offer rest. We're going to show that in how we, something as simple as having, genderless bathrooms or whatever it may be. We're going to do that in the small things. I think that a lot of times we look at these big, acts and be like, oh, this is great. But it's the small things of, affirming, like, we see you, we know what's going on, we see you. And so we're going to do our part in the way to make sure that at least when you are a part of this company, a part of this team, that who you are, how you show up is valued. And, it may cost us a little bit more money to do it, but that money is worth it in order to make sure that we are not just saying we have these values, but we're living these values as a company in the culture of the company.
And like you said, when you're talking about it, putting your money where your mouth is, right? And I really think that often that budgets are moral documents, and they become a bridge that gets people from your vision and your values to actual action, right? And actually doing something about the things that you say. We started off the conversation talking about just how rough June was. There's been some really painful irony in the fact that we've suffered so much loss to our civil and human rights, that we've seen just so much, just the loss of human life, the loss of access to abortion care. And it's happening during Pride Month, which is a time, for us, we know that Pride wasn't always a party and a parade, that it started as a protest, as a demand. It started as a protest led by trans women of color, demanding their human rights, demanding to be seen. Do you think that what happened last month during Pride will or should impact what Pride celebrations look like moving forward? We saw in the New York City Pride that happened right after the Dobbs decision came down, that reproductive health rights and justice activists were marching at the front of that parade. So folks are thinking, let's figure out what the intersections of these issues are. There's no need for them to be separate. This kind of the work that's happening around having access to abortion care is showing up at Pride. Do you think that we should continue to see this, this evolving of Pride as we are seeing the continuous attacks on our human rights?
I definitely think we should. It was interesting because during Pride Month, I was asked to speak at this gala that we have. It's the Stonewall reception we have here in St. Pete. And by the way, if you've never been to St. Pete Pride, y'all should come. It's lit. It's so good. It's so much fun. Oh my God, it's really gay. And so I was asked to speak
Next year.
next year, period. I was asked to speak, and these are, LGBTQ folks and allies that, have significant amount of money and all of those kinds of things. And, I centered my comments. I was like wondering, like, what am I going to talk about? Like, how am I for Pride? Yay. But what am I really going to center my comments in? And I centered my comments. And since that time, I've been really talking about this, how we are in another Stonewall moment, right? We are in a moment where we are watching folks in real time take our rights away, snatch our rights away, whether it is bodily autonomy. We have folks who are talking about who we can and cannot marry, whether it is interracial marriage, whether it is same gender loving relationships, whether the ability to use contraceptives, and so, and then so forth and so on, whether it's voting rights. And there was this brilliant, her name is Professor Kiara, and I want to say Davis or Douglas, but she even bridge to the intersection of the states that are restricting voting rights are the same states that are restricting, abortion, are the same states that are saying that they're going to come for, marriage and all of those things. So I really centered my comments. I understand that we need to be able to have joy, and this is and joy is an act of resistance. But while we are having this joy and we're celebrating and we're, twirling rainbows, we've got to understand that while we may not be getting pulled out of clubs and beaten and jailed, our ability to have the families that we would want to have, our abilities to be out in a way that we have been, that could be slowly ripped away. So what are we going to do in this moment? And I think that while we are centering Pride as a moment of joy, because I don't want anyone to take any joy away, like we should have that. Like that is our birthright. Joy is our birthright, right?
And a revolutionary act, right?
Yeah. And a revolutionary act. But I also think we can't be I'm so excited about Pride, this is great, but not realize that we are still fighting. And so I think that it's that intersection of having joy, but also knowing that when we are in the moments of Pride, we have to also use this month, that all of our, heterosexual, cisgender folks who are out here celebrating with us, great, I'm so glad you're here. Let me tell you what y'all need to be doing now, right? So glad that you came. Great. So here's your homework, and here's what you're going to do when you're done, dancing with us in the streets. And so I think that we have to, it can't be either or, it has to be and in both.
That's right. And, I think that there were so many folks who, I remember the day the Dobbs decision came down, and I had folks calling me, and and I know for some folks they're like, we're sort of going back and forth between like abortion and LGBTQ. I said, but it's the attack on our rights is the attack on our rights, right? Mm-hmm. But I remember that day folks calling me and saying like, I didn't actually, I mean, you said it was possible, but I didn't actually think that this was going to happen.
Black women knew it was happening. Black women knew this was going to happen.
Because Roe had always been the floor for us. But I think that this is also an opportunity, as we're thinking about what it looks like to build more intersectional prides and more intersectional conversations around Pride, is how are we talking about the ways that we need, the attacks that we need to be paying attention to, because they're always thinking about the next thing to snatch away. They're always thinking about the next thing to take.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my wife says this all the time, especially Democrats, like we play checkers and the Republicans are playing chess. This is a very long game for them, right? I think about having been in the legislature, and I worked in the legislature before I became a member, and just thinking about, this is not just like, oh, I just think like, oh, like we should attack LGBTQ folks. Like this is a part of a plan and a process for them, right? This is a part, we had bills that came for last year that it was a bill that if a doctor didn't agree with who you are, they don't have to treat you. That bill died, but the Don't Say Gay bill passed, right? So now that has laid the foundation for this bill to come back this next session. So all of this is not just coincidental, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. This is this long game, and we're watching it in front of our faces. And I think that's why I get really frustrated politically with the Democrats and with progressives, because the Republicans have given us the playbook. We're just not doing it. And so we have to know that they don't just wake up one day and say, this is what I'm going to do. This is a part of a plan that they've had, and they have been working this plan patiently and consistently for the last 50 to 60 years.
That's right. That's right. And to me, this really is about, the reason that we created this series, and I'm so excited for us to be able to do this episode with you. We wanted Beyond to really be an opportunity for people to think beyond just, their limitations, beyond the limitations that systemic oppression has put on them, beyond the limitations, that they have put on themselves, beyond the limitations that we put on our work sometimes, and our vision for what winning could actually look like. Right. Yeah. And so I want to hear from you before we go. What's one thing you're moving beyond in your work and in your life? And what's your call to action to our viewers?
Ooh, moving beyond to the call. Oh, yikes. Wow. It's always easier to do my call to action, but moving beyond, moving beyond, my limitations. There's a lot. I feel like this is a lot. I feel like this is a whole other episode, Nia. Good Lord. Right. Good Lord. I mean, there's several things. I mean, I think that one, I have realized in this work that I've been doing, and hopefully this is part of the questions that this answers your question. I think in the work that I'm doing, I've realized that rest is my birthright. I think that I am moving beyond just the doing, and activating and policy, but realizing that rest is my birthright. But to your point earlier, it's revolutionary.
I think beyond busy.
Okay, come on now. I feel like where's the offering plate? Moving beyond busy. That's also that, because I think that we sometimes just are like a hamster on a wheel. I think also moving beyond not trusting my gut. I think that there are limitations I've just put on myself, even professionally, that I'm like, I don't know if I could do that. And so, recently I am stepping into a role that I've never done before with on the policy side. So y'all be watching out for that. And so stepping into that and saying, I can't yell and say, trust Black women, and I don't trust myself, right? So, there's that. I can't be hollering out, trust Black women, and I don't really trust. And so, and so those are the things that I'm moving beyond in my life, and really putting, making sure that if it does not serve me, that I no longer am a part of that. And trusting that as I do that, everything that is for me will not miss me. My call to action, I've been saying this and yelling this for a while, and meaning that we're in, level setting, that we're in a Stonewall moment. I think that we have got to organize in a way that we have never organized before. We got to take it old school, and do what our parents and grandparents and great grandparents did during the civil rights movement. We've got to organize. We've also got to make sure that we are mobilizing. Like, it's great to change your Twitter picture and your Facebook picture, but what with this feet to the ground, what are we doing? How are you organizing in your own communities? And to the point that you were talking about earlier, finding your political home, whether it's a place of faith, whether it is a political party, whether it is a advocacy organization, And then, so when you're voting, you're not only, and then ultimately the last point is voting, but what does voting look like? I'm not just like, oh yeah, Lord, just go out and vote, but how do you relationally build, and how do you relationally mobilize? How do you relationally organize and relationally find a political home? So when we have consequential elections, my neighbor who's never talked to me before is like, who the hell are you talking to me? But they're like, oh, you know what? That's Michele. I talk to Michele. Michele be telling me what's going on, and having the patience to understand that people have real life going on. So they may not be as like, oh, yes, we need to gung ho, we need to go out here and march in the streets. But oh, I remember my neighbor told me about that. I remember she came by just to give me that word, and understanding that we've got to play this long game. And that's where what would be my call to action. So, organize, mobilize, find a political home, vote, but make sure when you're doing it relationally. You're bringing folks and playing this long game, because there are folks out here who are playing for keeps, and we're not, and we don't have time, because our very lives, our people's lives are on the line.
Absolutely. Michele, thank you so, so much for being the first guest on our Beyond series, and for coming here with me and talking about what it means to be moving beyond pride. Folks, Michele shares a ton of gorgeousness and gems on her Instagram, so you can follow her at Michele for FL, and that's just one L in Michele. So it's Michele for Florida, so just for FL, or at Your Lawyer Sawyer.
Yes, that's the personal one, where you see me and my wife just being just Black and queer and gorgeous, and
Black and queer and gorgeous and cute and just amazing. Tell Bianca I said hello.
I will.
And then please also follow For the Culture, myself and my team at Shift Your Culture on Instagram. Thank you all so much for watching. Michele, thank you for being here. Thank you for your brilliance, for your bravery, just for your badassness in general, and for all that you do. I can't wait to actually see you in person one day soon. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here.
All right, thanks.